Good afternoon and welcome to our third and final session in our Crowdfunding for Changemakers series, all about running your project. My name's Sammy Morja. I'm broadcasting live today from Crowdfunder HQ in Newquay, and we're also incredibly lucky to be joined by Rob from Growing Better as well. And we're going to be talking to Rob throughout the session today about his experiences after successfully raising funds with Crowdfunder over the summer. So we're going to hear a little bit from Rob then. So actually, you can probably get us started first of all, Rob, just by telling us a little bit about what you set out to achieve with Crowdfunder.
Okay, so very briefly, we're an urban farming social enterprise supporting people with mental health challenges. We started out about a year and a half ago growing in polytunnels, but we realized that we couldn't grow commercially sustainable level in polytunnels throughout the year, and obviously we wanted to support people throughout the year, so we kind of pivoted the business and decided to grow indoors, and after a lot of research decided that hydroponic vertical farming was the way to go. And the way to get that started was to grow in a shipping container. So our crowdfunding was to raise £20,000 to buy the shipping container and all the equipment and get it fitted out.
Amazing. Okay, so we're going to, as I say, keep jumping back to Rob as we go through, so we'll kind of learn a little bit more about his journey. So just to kind of recap on where we are in this series. So the first part was all about planning your project, and then we looked at creating the perfect project page, and now we're very much focused on running the project. So that's connecting with your community and actually getting the pledges in. We are going to be touching on a few areas in more depth today. In particular, we're going to be spending a bit of time looking at Facebook a bit later on, so do stay tuned for some more of that. I'm also going to point out at this stage that there are 3 guides from Crowdfunder that go along with each of these sessions, planning, creating and running. And there is a version of that guide that's specifically for people who are interested in the Changemaker Fund. So you can download that from the Crowdfunder website, and you'll also be able to find a link with this video as well. So if you haven't accessed any of those guides yet, absolutely worthwhile. You'll find almost sort of a play-by-play of what it is that you need to do as you're going about the journey of crowdfunding. So some really helpful bits and bobs in there if you're kind of thinking, you know, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do next, that will help to sort of guide you through. Okay, so coming back to you now, Rob. What do you think is the most important thing to think about when you're promoting your project?
Can I only have one?
You can have more than one.
Okay. I think one is, you know, get your team and make sure you've got plenty of time. You know, you probably need one person on this pretty well full time, plus a team of other people to support you. But if there's one thing, it's really to get inside of the people that you've decided are going to be your pledgers. Get inside their head, understand what is going to appeal to them, and really focus your story and every element of your campaign around that, and be really, really focused on that. Yeah,
I think that's actually really, really good advice. It's all going back to kind of the emphasis that we put on that planning stage, is making sure that you're really clear on who your audience is and exactly what their motivation is. I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, Rob. So what we're going to do now is just kind of whip through some of what we call kind of the fundamentals of crowdfunding. There's kind of 3 key points that we're going to talk about here. First one, something which is absolutely going to benefit you when you launch your project. And actually, it helps to calm the nerves as well. I'm crowdfunding myself at the moment, and knowing that you've got a bit of a plan and you know what's happening definitely helps to weigh up the ratios between excitement and terror, very much more in the favour of the excitement. So lining up 10%. This is, again, it's a bit of an arbitrary number. I made sure that I had 30% lined up because I wanted to be super, super safe and sure. But it's a good idea just to make sure that you have some support on day one. It's really tough if you put your project live and then you're sat there on 0 or just with sort of 1 or 2 pledges. It's very demotivating. And it also means that your project isn't kind of looking its best and for when that you're sending it out to people. So how do you do that? How do you make sure that you've got 10% and you've got some early pledges? Well, really, it kind of comes from that core network. It comes from people that have either a close connection to you, to your organisation, to the project. Those people that are probably going to support it from the get-go. They're not people that are going to wait and see how it goes. They're the people that are already pretty invested in what you're doing. So this is where this bit in the middle really comes into play. You know, what we call start from the middle and work your way out. And what we're referring to there is the shape of your crowd, of your network. So those people at the core, those people very close to you, are much more likely to support your project in the early stages than those people much further out. You know, it's almost sort of common sense when you start thinking about it. But through that, that's really kind of the strategy that works for crowdfunding. I think there's a bit of a misconception that you go live and you suddenly tell everyone you know about it on day one, and then bang, it just kind of gets funded. Whereas actually it's more about kind of shifting up the gears bit by bit. We find sometimes if people start sharing their project with people too further afield, people too sort of outside of their own network early on, they'll perhaps like the sound of it, come onto the page, but then see 7% funded, you know, 3 backers, 4 backers, and just sort of think, I'm not sure I'm quite convinced yet with such sort of low numbers on the board. It is something that we know people take into consideration, how funded it is, how many people have supported it. It helps with credibility and also kind of verifying, you know, that what you're doing is kind of decent and worthwhile and something interesting. So, you know, believe it or not, that is something that's quite key. And do make sure with your communication whenever possible to be personal and be direct. And of course, that's kind of within the realms of practicality and sort of possibility. It's not going to be possible for you to be super personal and direct with every single person that you want to support the crowdfund. But do use the avenues available to you. So if you have someone's phone number, give them a call or pop them a text through. If you know you're friends with them on Facebook, get in touch with them directly instead of just sticking something up on your timeline. Those little ways, actually, you'll tend to find that people are quite appreciative of the time that you've actually spent getting in touch with them personally, particularly if it's people that you think, actually, they would be really interested in knowing about this. I know that it's the kind of thing they'd like to support, and I don't feel like I'm, you know, doing anything wrong by telling them about it. I think they're gonna want to know about it. Then definitely, you know, taking that one-to-one time is absolutely worth it. Something which, you know, I'm sure a lot of crowdfunders will recognise is this chart here that I've taken from a dashboard, which is just your average project, if you like. And that's kind of looking at the shape of what happens. What we're seeing here is pledges by day. So we're seeing a little influx at the start, it goes a little quiet, then they have another peak around the middle of the month, and then it picks back up towards the end after dropping off again. So often a lot of crowdfunding projects are this U shape, where you have a lot at the start and a lot at the end. I can see you nodding away there, Rob. A lot at the start, a lot at the end. But actually, you know, what we want to do ideally is add a few more peaks to that U, make it more of a W or even a wavy C, if you like. So the way to do that is really just to have a plan for, you know, throughout the whole period. So if you've got little things coming, whether that's a little event, a bit of PR, maybe you've got a new reward that you're releasing, and whatever those things are, just little things to keep it ticking over, some fresh content, and to kind of keep it rolling, so that you don't end up, you know, in the plateau of doom in the middle, thinking, it's all over, I'm never going to get another pledge again. Keep the faith, it will come back, I promise. So thinking now about what techniques and what key channels of communication you have access to. The two that we really highlight on Crowdfunder are email and social media, and specifically Facebook, actually, within social media. Round about 3/4 of pledges, depending on the project, tend to come from a combination of those two. I don't know how different that was for your project, Rob.
Yeah, Facebook and Twitter was really important for us because of the particular crowd we were trying to reach. Facebook was important, email was very important, but direct contact was as well, especially with when you can't phone hundreds and hundreds of people, but you can phone people that you think are going to be key, especially a couple of, there's usually a few people that are likely to be quite big hits, potential big hitters, and it's worth investing some time in them. I know it sounds a bit instrumentalist, but you know, this is serious stuff. The other thing we did was make sure we downloaded all their contacts from LinkedIn. You get all their email addresses. Just BCC everybody. Don't send them all in your to box. But yeah, that's a good way. We picked up a few that way. We also got on community TV as well and did an interview and picked up some pledges and some long-term relationships that way as well. So yeah, good variety. Yeah, a good variety across all channels. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again that kind of different mixture, what you mentioned just at the start there, is massively going to depend on your audience. If, you know, for example, there's a real hotbed, you know, a really great little pocket of people, you know, in a particular group on a particular social media or a mailing list that you might have, then that, you know, of course is going to be more important. And of course, thinking about what channel is correct for those different audience types, you know, as Rob mentioned there, if you have a couple of key people which you think, you know, it's really important that you speak to them personally, you really want to secure their support, then absolutely it's worth picking up the phone. You might not be able to do that, you know, as you say, to hundreds of people, but it's really worth, you know, thinking about what is the correct way to be talking to these people, through what channel, and you know, what kind of messages should I be including. So focusing a little bit more on social media and in particular Facebook, because this really is a big one for a lot of projects. We're going to kind of whip through some top tips. So what makes a great post? And of course, there's more than 5 things that makes a great post, but I wouldn't be able to fit them all on a slide and then I'd be lost. So these are kind of 5 really essential things to think about, just kind of the basics for the vast majority of different projects. So first rule of crowdfunding: always have to talk about crowdfunding. There's also other things going on, and that's not necessarily the most exciting thing about your project. Often the most exciting thing is the impact that you're having, or your goals, or what you're trying to achieve, or what you've already achieved. It doesn't just have to be a barrage for 4 weeks of the fact that you're crowdfunding. Definitely make sure that, you know, you're not completely bashing people around the head with it day in and day out. Do use bold and beautiful images, and by that we mean things that are striking, things that are really going to stand out on people's news feeds, or, you know, when they receive an invitation to an event or whatever it is, however you're posting. But those things that, you know, their attention. If you imagine, you know, just scrolling through your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed at any particular time, so what are the things that I stop on? What are the things that I actually take a second, and it might only be a second, but I actually take a second to take in what it is that they're talking about. What, you know, what is it about that that's really jumped out to me? And you can of course test, you know, those images before you go live. You can, you know, ask people in your audience, and I've actually seen a few projects do that really well recently, about which, you know, color scheme they prefer between this or that. You know, which one is really eye-catching? Do they prefer this image or that one? And then very much using, you know, that feedback to work it out. Video is something which is more and more becoming pretty important on social media, and there's some really interesting insight out that put about video on Facebook recently, which talks about, you know, the average time that people watch a video for is between sort of 8 and, you know, 10 seconds. So taking your project video from your crowdfund, perhaps putting out little snippets that work well on their own, and then feeding that content out on social media is a really great way to kind of squeeze a bit more juice from it, if you like. And you can actually, with Facebook, add in subtitles as well, which I definitely recommend doing if you haven't already got that on your video. Again, some really interesting data saying that a lot of people, or the majority of people, don't actually play video with the sound on. So things are very much changing. So hopefully we can, you know, through sessions like this, help you to keep your finger on the pulse of what kind of thing you can be doing on social media to make sure you're getting attention. And do include a call to action. And what we mean by that is ask people to do something. What are you asking them? Do you want them to check something out? Do you want them to pledge? Do you want them to find out about this? Do you want them to contribute? Do you want them to join you? Whatever those different things might be, it's almost kind of leaving them with an action, something that they can do next. And finally, and probably the most obvious one, mix it up. Whatever it is that you're posting about, too much of one thing is never right. We want to make sure that we've got lots of stuff. So maybe concentrate on a reward, and then maybe post a video. Maybe you have a testimonial from someone else. Maybe you have, some interesting numbers about what you've achieved. All these different things is really what's going to kind of give it a nice mix and a few kind of different flavors. So continuing with Facebook for a minute, if you don't already have a Facebook page set up, I would absolutely recommend doing that at the absolute earliest. It is a really great tool because they actually make it very easy for you to use Facebook in an effective way, and they offer lots of tutorials and guides as you're going through. It's free to set up a page, and it's literally a case of sort of filling in boxes. They tell you exactly what it is that you need to fill out, and before you know it, your page is live. I'm just going to highlight a couple of features that you get specifically with a Facebook page, which can be quite useful on crowdfunding. One of them is doing things like photo albums or carousels via your Facebook page, which again stands out quite well on newsfeed, so a different kind of format where you can have a few different images. You can also create events from your page itself, which is really useful if you want to set one up maybe for the date and the time that your project goes live on Crowdfunder, or maybe for the time that it closes, or if you're doing a party or an event whilst you're crowdfunding. That's a really useful tool for you to do. It's great because people actually get a notification about it in that little top corner, and they get a little red one, which is, of course, we want easy and quick ways to get people's attention through different methods. So that's another really good one. And Facebook boosts. A lot of people that I work with who are crowdfunding haven't actually ever tried Facebook boosting or actually doing ads. And it's quite an easy way to kind of dip a toe in the ad market without getting too wet, if you like, because the way that a boost actually works in terms of what it costs you, you kind of lay out right from the start how much you're willing to spend. So the minimum amount you can boost a post for is £1. And you set it how many days you'd like to boost for and how much you'd like to spend. So you can say, £5 over 5 days, so £1 a day, or maybe, £100 on one day. You want to have a really big push on one day, and you can set all of that. So you can take a post, and again, we've just grabbed a screenshot from a page that I'm a manager of. You see that little blue boost button down there. You can click that. You can either boost it to people who already like your page and their friends, or you can actually pick an audience through targeting, which I find quite interesting. You can have a play around with it. So different demographics, maybe gender, age, and interests, as well as location. And then, as I say, it will actually estimate for you how many people your post might reach, depending on what budget you put in and how many days. So it's quite interesting, and it's, as I say, a relatively cheap way to have a go at boosting without getting too involved in spending lots of money on advertising and that kind of thing. So one final tip, and this is something a little bit sneaky that I discovered recently and I wanted to share with you. So if you share a post from your Facebook page, you get lots of people liking it, let's say, and you'll see down at the bottom underneath that post, we can see a little list of names where all the people who have liked it. Now, if you click that list of names, what will pop up is this window that we can see on the right. And it will sort of grey out all the people who already like your page. Anyone who doesn't already like your page, there's a fantastic little button there that says invite, and you just click that and they get an invitation in their notifications asking if they'd like to like your page, which is a really great way to really boost that following. I do it all the time. It works really well. Lots of people follow you up on that invite, and then of course they're into your community, they're into your crowd of people who are finding out about what you're doing. So that's enough Facebook. I think I've sort of gone on about Facebook enough. Of course, as Rob said, crowdfunding does happen in the real world as well. We are all human beings. And actually one of the most important things for my project is just talking to people. It's just going out and about and attending events and chatting about what I'm doing. And, you know, we've highlighted here a few other channels and different things that you might want to do, like putting up posters or getting the local press involved if it's a very local project. And I know you touched on a few other channels of communication a moment ago, Rob. Would you mind going into a little bit more detail, telling us about other things other than social media that you did that sort of worked particularly well?
Well, LinkedIn, I guess, might be considered a form of social media, but that was, you know, a lot of people have a lot of LinkedIn contacts. I have, you know, over 500 because, you know, I've been working a long time in previous careers, and it's a good way of reaching out to all those people. As I say, a lot of people don't realize you can download everyone's name and email address from there. We didn't have a launch party in the end because it didn't really suit our topic, but I think it's a really good idea. If you've got a product that you can, say, take to a farmer's market or some kind of festival or something like that and get a lot of interest that way, hand out cards, get pledges on the spot. And if you can take online payments, you can take small payments on the spot. So there's nothing better than that. So there's lots of ideas that we thought about, but we didn't implement because they weren't quite right for our project. But you know, if we were going again, when we go again, you know, we'll certainly try a few different things out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to kind of finish up by going through the different sort of tips on launching a project, with a reminder that once your project does go live, you will have access to your very own Crowdfunder Live dashboard, which is a hub of stats and information. You can either see it there on your dashboard, or if you prefer, you can download that and you'll get all the data. You can open it up on a spreadsheet and play around with it and do sort of weird and wonderful things with the data. But there's a few key bits I wanted to draw your attention to just here. Along where you see it says your views to pledge conversion rate. That's a really interesting one to keep an eye on. The average conversion rate is actually around about 5%. So if your project is punching way above that, it means that it's converting really well, that the traffic that you're driving the page to is obviously connecting with the page really well. If your conversion rate drops below 5%, there's often a couple of key reasons why that might be. It might be that the traffic that you're driving to the page isn't quite the right traffic. Maybe they're not relevant to the project. It might be that there's something missing from the page, whether that's a key piece of information or that credibility. There's kind of a piece of the puzzle missing that's not quite converting them. Or, and often this is quite a common one, there's just not a reward which they're really after. They've seen something they like, but it's too expensive, or there's not really anything which suits them, and they kind of just lose a bit of interest in the kind of that steam behind that initial sort of motivation and interest in what it was that you were doing. So it's a good kind of litmus test, keep an eye on that number and kind of checking where it is, just to kind of track, you know, are we on track, are we where we want to be? Another other thing which I think is really, really useful is those referrals, which tells you where your pledges are actually coming from. And essentially what you want to be doing with your dashboard and what this facilitates is for you to actually discover what's working. What's working, what's not working, what should we do more of, what should we not bother doing again? Of course, time is limited. In an ideal world, you know, perhaps we'd be crowdfunding 24 hours a day, but actually people have lives, people have jobs and children and things outside of crowdfunding. So when your time is limited, we want to make sure that you're spending it in the most efficient way possible. So checking back and, you know, if you had a really huge peak on one particular day, thinking what was it that caused that? Did we put a post out? You know, did we get some press? You know, what really worked well? And then trying to replicate that and learn from that and take it forwards, so that you are doing the best things possible. So I'm gonna come back to you one last time, Rob, for the big question. And this time you're only allowed one. Yeah. And that is, what is your one top piece of advice for someone who is about to launch?
If it's got to be one, then I think it is really craft your story and get people not in your group to look at it and validate it, you know, aren't too close to it, because that is your window. This is your, you know, people are going to end up there. That's your one opportunity. It's really got to speak to them, and it's got to tell a story. It's not an essay. It's not a research paper. It's a story.
Fantastic. I think that's really great advice, and that's probably the advice that I'd give as well. So that's really great to hear, Rob. So I'm just going to finish off by recapping on some of the funding that is available. And actually, this is funding that Rob's project received. They did receive £10,000 from the Changemaker Fund, who I do in that pot of funding. Do log on to Crowdfunder and have a look at Changemaker. There's around about £100,000 left now, so half of the money has gone out the door, so there's not a lot of time. If you are interested in that fund, you can check out the full criteria there. Once you've added your project, when you're in your project dashboard, you'll see this little handy yellow box pop up with a kind of a tell me more. If you click on that, that will take you straight through to the application page. On that page, it's a really simple form that you can fill out, and there's also a little button there so you can see the full criteria. Do make sure, of course, that you check your project fits with the criteria. We don't want you, spending lots of time filling out an application if actually it's not quite right. And also do make sure that you're taking into account the criteria when you are filling out that application form. So kind of have the two together and make sure that you're answering the questions as kind of fully as you can do. From here, next 3 things to do. Pick a launch date. I think this is quite handy, and this is something that I did. And then work backwards, from that launch date, and give yourself little milestones. If we want to launch on this date, we need to have our page ready 2 weeks before, let's say. Then we want to make sure that we've done this. Right, well, that means we better get cracking then. It gives kind of a little bit of rocket fuel to the fire, and make sure that actually you've got a date to start talking to people about. I think I was shouting, from the rooftops about the fact my launch date was the 4th of October for about a month before it launched. So you could ask anyone here in the office or elsewhere, probably in the whole of Newquay, and they all knew that, 4th of October was the big day, and that was really helpful for me. Do get your email address book together. As Rob said, there's some great tools like on LinkedIn where you can actually export all of your contacts, which is fantastic and a really great way to kind of clean off that list and make sure that all of your contacts are in one place. So whether you use MailChimp or whether you just use Inbox or whatever that might be, do kind of clean out your email address book and check you kind of know who everyone is. And set up a Facebook page. I know I've drilled that home quite a lot, but it's absolutely worthwhile. It is free and it is pretty easy. So definitely recommend that. Now, if you have any questions at all about anything we've spoken about today or anything we haven't spoken about, you can reach us here. We're real humans. We're quite nice, I promise. We're very friendly. And we're support@crowdfunder.co.uk. And that's how you can reach us. So the only thing left for me to say is good luck with running your own projects. We hope to see you all crowdfunding very soon with us. And thanks again to Rob for coming on and sharing your experience and your insights with everyone. Best of luck. Thanks. Bye.
Good luck.